My name is Dr. Mike Murphy. I'm an assistant professor of computer science and information systems at Coastal Carolina University. In this lecture, I will discuss memory protection, including segmentation and permission bits on page table entries. Remember that operating systems perform two functions, abstraction and arbitration. Mechanisms for accessing memory provide abstractions of the underlying memory hardware. However, operating systems must also arbitrate access to RAM by ensuring that one process cannot access memory that does not belong to it. Without this arbitration, a process could change memory belonging to another process, or worse, it could crash the system by changing memory that belongs to the kernel. On systems that utilize simple memory management, such as power of two methods, memory access protections are provided by a mechanism called segmentation. On the majority of modern systems which employ paging, memory protection is implemented as part of the paging system, and memory access permissions are stored in the page table. On any system, process memory is divided into logical pieces or segments at compile time. These segments include the text segment, a region for global variables, a stack region for automatic variables, and a heap for dynamically allocated data structures. Access permissions apply to each segment. In particular, the text segment is set to be read-only. Outside a single process, there must be a mechanism to track which segments of memory belong to which processes. When a process is executing, its segments are marked valid so that it can access the corresponding memory locations. Segments of memory belonging to other processes are marked invalid, and any attempt to access those segments results in a fault or interrupt called a segmentation fault. Typically, a segmentation fault causes the process to be terminated. Segment memory permissions are implemented on non-paging systems using a segment table. The segment table has permission bits that can be applied to each region of memory. When memory is accessed using segmentation, the segment table must be consulted to determine whether or not the access is legal. In this example, a process requests access to memory using a logical address. Since we do not have paging with this system, this logical address is not translated by a page table mechanism. However, this logical address is divided into a segment address and an offset into the segment in a manner similar to page translation. The MMU checks the segment table to determine if a particular memory access is valid. In this example, the segment table stores up to 4 permissions and up to 3 bits, a valid-invalid bit, a read-write bit, and an execute bit. In practice, most systems that support segmentation without paging normally only use 2 bits, valid-invalid and read-write. If the process tries to read from a segment that is marked valid, the memory access is permitted and occurs normally. The same thing happens if a process tries to write to a memory location that is marked both valid and writable. However, if a process tries to write to a segment marked read-only, or if a process tries to access an invalid segment, the CPU triggers a segmentation fault and the process is terminated. For some invalid accesses on a Unix-like system, this segmentation fault may be reported as a bus error. With paging systems, which comprise the majority of modern systems, including mobile devices, memory protection is accomplished by adding permission bits to the page table entries. In general, page table entries will have a valid-invalid bit and a read-write bit. The valid-invalid bit is used in the same way as it is for segmentation. Pages that a process is allowed to access are marked valid. Other pages, and any non-existent pages, are marked invalid. If a process attempts to access an invalid page, a CPU fault is raised, which functions like an interrupt to trap into the kernel. A Linux kernel will send a SIG-SEG-V or SIG-bus signal to the process, depending on the location in memory the process tried to access. In practice, this signal is normally not caught, and the process terminates. For historical reasons, this event is called a segmentation fault, or SEG fault for short. The read-write bit used to mark the text segment of a process, can be used to allow pages of memory to be shared between processes. Pages that are reentrant, or read-only, can be accessed by multiple instances of multiple programs simultaneously. This capability is useful on modern systems since multiple instances of programs are typically run at the same time. In the case of a web browser, for example, it is only necessary to load one copy of the browser program code into memory. Several copies of the browser can be run as several different processes, sharing the program code and thus saving memory. The open-source Chromium browser and its Google Chrome derivative allow each tab to run in a separate process. Shared memory pages allow the code for the browser, any extensions, and any plugins to be loaded only once, saving memory. This diagram illustrates how two processes can share a single page in RAM. Each process sees a handful of valid frames, one of which is marked read-only. If this memory frame contains code or other information that can be shared between the processes, then the two frame numbers will be identical within the separate processes. Each process may use a different page number to represent this memory location, however, since each process has its own independent, logical view of memory. Incidentally, this diagram is a conceptual diagram only. It does not directly map to any particular data structure in the operating system. Instead, the two tables illustrate how each process might see the page table. Newer AMD and Intel CPUs support an additional permission bit for setting execute permissions. This bit, called the no-execute or NX bit, is actually an inverted permission. It is set to 1 whenever execution of data found on a memory page is forbidden. Originally, the NX bit was implemented by AMD on its 64-bit capable processors, using the marketing name of Enhanced Virus Protection. Intel followed suit and added this mechanism as the execute disable or XD bit. The concept behind the bit was to provide a mechanism that could be used to prevent execution of native machine instructions from memory space used for regular data. Although the primary beneficiary of this feature was a certain virus-prone system that is not a Unix variant, the Linux kernel does support the NX bit as a guard against buffer overflow and similar exploits. In the example presented in the hypothetical page table here, only the page with hex numbers 04A4 allows code execution. In the event of an exploit attempt, a malicious application could try to load code in another page, perhaps 04A1. However, since the NX bit is set on that page, any attempt to execute the code loaded by the exploit will trigger a CPU fault, and the process will be terminated. This mechanism increases the security of the system against certain types of attacks.
Anyone who attempts to travel to Australia by boat without a visa will be turned back or transferred to a regional processing country. The following information is not for people whose protection claims are being assessed in regional processing countries. This information is for people who arrived in Australia by boat without a visa on or after 13 August 2012 and before 1 January 2014 and whose protection claims will be assessed in Australia. The Australian government has started to invite people in Australia who arrived illegally by boat to apply for a protection visa. People must wait to receive an invitation before applying. There are many people who need to apply. It will take a long time to process them all. You need to be patient and wait for your invitation. While you wait for your invitation, there are some things you can do to prepare. Make sure the Immigration Department has your current address and other contact details. To update your contact details, call 1300 728 662. With your name, date of birth, boat identification number, home address, and contact phone number. You can collect the documents and information you will need for when it is your turn to apply. This includes original genuine evidence of your identity, nationality and citizenship, which could include identity and travel documents. You should also collect information and evidence to support your claims for protection. To help you understand the protection visa application process, there are translated guides on the department's website. You should look at the guides before you are invited to apply so you are ready when it's your turn. You can find them at www.border.gov.au/PAIG. If you want to hire a registered migration agent to help you, you can do so at your own cost. If you do hire a registered migration agent, let the Immigration Department know so they can contact you through that agent. When it's your turn, the Immigration Department will send you or your agent an invitation to apply for a visa. As you arrived illegally, you can only apply for a temporary protection visa or a safe haven enterprise visa. You should consider which type of temporary visa is best for you. You can find more information about these visa options at www.border.gov.au/IMA. When you apply for a protection visa, it is very important to give the Immigration Department all your protection claims and supporting evidence early and in full. If you do not do this and your application is refused, you will probably not have an opportunity to provide any new claims or new evidence. The Immigration Department will consider your application and ask you to come to an interview to discuss your application and claims for protection. After the interview, a departmental officer will fully assess all your claims and evidence and make a decision on whether or not you engage Australia's protection obligations. If you are found to engage Australia's protection obligations and meet all other requirements like health, security, character and identity checks, you will be granted a visa. If you are found not to engage Australia's protection obligations, your application will be refused. You will be expected to depart Australia. Visit the Immigration Department's web pages for up-to-date information about the protection visa application process.
So what's the difference between short-circuit protection and overload protection? Now this is a great question since it can be common for people to misuse the term short-circuit to describe any electrical malfunction regardless of the actual problem. Now both short-circuit and overload protection devices are going to protect your motor circuit from overcurrent. Overcurrent or excess current is a situation where a larger than intended electric current exists, which leads to excessive generation of heat and the risk of fire or damage to the equipment. So you want to make sure you're protected for a number of reasons. First and foremost is safety. Work-related injuries are costly to everyone, not only financially, but in the way an injury can affect almost every aspect of a worker's life. A safe workplace not only protects workers from injury, it can also increase productivity and quality. And that means saving time. Ensuring you have the proper protection in place can prevent downtime and maintenance, and as a result, save you money. So let's dive into the differences between short-circuit versus overload protection. Overload protection is a protection against a running overcurrent that would cause overheating. Overload protection typically operates on an inverse time curve, where the tripping time becomes less as the current increases. This means an overload relay isn't going to trip on momentary or short-term overcurrent events that are normal for the piece of equipment it is protecting. For example, some equipment may create inrush currents as it starts up. These inrush currents typically last only a few seconds and rarely cause a problem. So overload relays are used in a motor circuit to protect motors from damage caused by prolonged periods of overcurrent. Now on the other hand, we have short circuit protection. A short circuit occurs when current travels along an unintended path, often where essentially no or a very low electrical impedance is encountered. So short circuit protection is protection against excessive currents or current beyond the acceptable current rating of equipment, and it operates instantly. As soon as an overcurrent is detected, the device trips and breaks the circuit. So let's sum up. Overload protection breaks a circuit only after a prolonged period of overcurrent. Short circuit protection breaks a circuit the instant an overcurrent is detected. If you'd like to learn more about this or many other topics, visit us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, or as always, at ecoonline.com.